Hello, I'm Joe Walensky of WritersUA, and I'm speaking with some of the presenters who will be at our conference at the upcoming WritersUA West in Palm Springs in March. And today I am speaking with Hamish Blunck. Hello, Hamish, how are you?
Hey Joe, I'm doing well. How are you going?
All right, well, it's summer where you're at. Where are you talking to us from today?
So I'm in Australia at the moment. Well, that's where I live in Brisbane in Queensland, which is I don't know about 1,000 k's north of Sydney. So it's a lot warmer than Sydney, but yeah, it's not a bad place.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks for making the long trip over here for the conference. If you're not familiar with Hamish, he's the owner of Segway Consulting, which provides technical communication and also author consulting. He specializes in multi-channel publishing, and he's also an author certified consultant. Hamish, he has as his topic at the conference creating audience-centric documentation using AuthorIt. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your presentation?
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, as you said, I'm talking about creating audience-centric documentation, and in particular with AuthorIt, although other tools will equally apply. So I guess I'd be introducing the concept of it and why you'd want to do that. So some of the reasons that you'd want to go ahead and do that, maybe to reduce complexity in the documentation, maybe to target the documentation at the people who are actually reading it at the time. Also talk about some of the considerations that you'll want to think about before you go ahead and start planning for this. And some of the pitfalls as well, because you can overcomplicate this and make it too complex to maintain in the future. And it'll be a very practical presentation as well, so how you actually go and do it, in this case using AuthorIt. But I'll also be talking a little bit about SharePoint as well, because that's how we integrate it with the solution. So I guess the impetus for this presentation was I work with an organisation who's a community care provider here in Australia, and I'd been doing lots of other work for them, but they had all of their policy documentation in one long Word document. And as you can imagine, it was quite long and unwieldy, and it basically had everything crammed in there for all of the regions that they work in and for all of the different positions that they have in the organisation. So it was really not a great way to present the information to their audience, so their employees. And so we came up with a way of being able to split up that documentation and deliver it to the employees based on their region that they're in and also their position. And our goal was really to simplify it so that the lower level employees in the organisation really only see what they need to see, and then as the positions go up through the organisation, they get to see that information plus their own customised information for their position as well. And also putting security around it so that members of the ELT, the management team, for example, they will have their own documentation which might be privy only to them and not for the rest of the organisation. So there are all of those considerations around it. So as I said, we'll talk a little bit about planning for that, so what to look out for, how not to overcomplicate it, some tips around that. And as I said, I'll be using AuthorIt as the example in this demonstration because that's what we use for this solution. So talking about AuthorIt variants, the functionality in AuthorIt which lets you actually swap content in and out depending on a number of criteria that you might specify. So we'll actually go through and show how to set up variants in AuthorIt, some of the configuration around that and what they can and can't do, some of the things that you need to look out for while you're creating variants and planning for them. Then we'll actually go and create some content and see how that works using the variants, and then how it publishes out into the different channels, so for the different positions and regions. So the output from AuthorIt is really about having a distinct set of documentation for each region, so for each state in Australia and for each position within that state. So it's very much customised, so the content will have, talks about legislation that is applicable in that particular region and maybe about the responsibility of the employee in that position. And then finally, we'll actually talk a little bit about how we've integrated that into SharePoint, because they use SharePoint as their main care management system, and they've got quite a lot of customized web parts that they use to drive their business. And so the final integration part was actually having a policy button on the web part which they click, and because SharePoint knows which region they're in and which position they are performing, it will display the documentation particular to that region and for their position. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'll go through, that whole process of the planning right through to actually implementing it in all through and how we go about doing that.
All right, great. Well, thanks for taking the time to spend a few minutes previewing what you'll be talking about, and we'll look forward to seeing you in Palm Springs in March.
Yep, I'm looking forward to being there. It's going to be great. Cool. Thanks, Joe.
All right, bye.